Been waiting patiently.
Okay. You'd want to respond to the discussants?
That's
5 minutes for 5 minutes.
There was something that I wanted to. It will come in the course of whatever it is. Let me recall it. I did want to respond to something that Chandrakumar mentioned, and there are small little things, but then I think we should have a round of questions first, because they've all been waiting patiently to. I don't know how many of you have read the book or have had occasion to look at parts of it, but you can also respond to the presentation as people have made. Or you can ask your questions based on whatever appeals to you as an issue that you would like us to think about.
About the forest and how interesting the forest is, especially in Dushyant and Shakuntala's story, how he points out the description of the forest and also the space, the kind of space which is for Shakuntala. And when we then look at the story of Madhavi, the kind of space she is imagining for the forest. So how the context of the forest is kind of changing during the text now. For one, it is something like the hermitage, the safe space, the king's space, the king has access to it. The other could be a space which the renunciant can use.
Yeah.
Something about that.
Yeah, but it's also even in the Ramayana, it is the space that harbors the wronged woman in the form of Sita. So actually, the Vana is representing the Vana at this post-marriage stage or the post-reproduction stage is slightly different from the Vana in the context of Dushyanta and Shakuntala. Shakuntala is actually someone who doesn't organically belong to the Vana at all. Her father is an adoptive father, and he has his hermitage over there, and she's grown up, and she herself is an abandoned child because she's been basically. I have a whole discussion around Apsaras, which we haven't been able to go into, but Apsaras are playing a very important role in the reproduction of the lineage at critical moments in whatever it is. So Shakuntala is actually part Apsara and part futuristic savvy queen, because she is very clear that her child is must be the progenitor of the entire dynasty. The Bharatas owe their thing to. So I think the Vana is a different space in the context of Shakuntala. She Ittifaq says there because she's been abandoned by her mother and brought up over here. It's more like a romantic setting. It's not the Vairagya setting. It's a romantic setting. In fact, the king, by the way, king has had, I think he has multiple partners already. It's not that he is not, he could, but he's never been able to reproduce in his palace setting. I have a long section on hunting and how hunting is a obstruction to reproduction. There is a regular thread in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata, including the Ramayana, because it's wrongs committed in the forest which catch up on you some way. So the forest is interesting space, but it's also it's conceptualized differently in the context of Shakuntala, who's there by chance, kind of, and in the context of those who have left the kingdom or left domesticity and the household or whatever it is and moved into the forest. So both in the case of Madhavi and in the case of Sita, Sita is abandoned and left in the forest. So the forest is a space which seems to be only Madhavi chooses the forest. And she chooses the forest because, to my mind, the palace has offered her nothing. The palace has used her as an instrument of reproduction, as the bearer of kings. It is only her womb that is significant, and because she can produce Chakravarti sons, she's got this gift. Her sons will be Chakravarti sons. So, which means they've got royalty and imperialdom built into what they're doing. So in one sense, Madhavi can reproduce, her quality is reproduction of these sons. Now what's also important, and which is not something that one normally reads off the text, but one of the things is that how do you, there is this whole business of it, the virginity question. You have to have a womb that can be, what would you call it, sealed off from previous encounters. So all of these, even Draupadi has the capacity to become a virgin again each time she reproduces. That is why they give you a period of 1 year. She stays with a particular one of the brothers for 1 year, and then she's passed on to the other, and it goes sequentially according to the sequence of what is it called, birth. So in some ways the womb has to be secured as safe. Why? Because you have to be able to say kiska beta kaun hai, and you can't have it free floating ki confusion ki kiska bachcha hai, because then the whole threat to succession and orderly reproduction is ruined. So in a sense, where you create these other customs, polyandry or whatever it is, you still have to make sure that that you are following the norms of the undisputed paternity. And the undisputed paternity is critical from the point of view of the manner in which succession will be followed. Okay, it's an offshoot. I'll return to this, or let me finish with this. Now, I think I began by looking at Madhavi as a fictive creation of the Mahabharata Valas, which is like sort of giving her no agency at all, turn her into a passive creature, because usko, she herself opens her mouth when the king, the first king that she's passed on to, Galav says to her, take her, she can produce Chakravarti sons. And he said, I don't have the wealth to give you 800 horses, but I will take her I can give you 200 horses and I'll have her for a year. Now, Galav is confused. He doesn't know whether he should actually follow up on that. But she then turned around and said, accept the offer, because I have this virtue that I can be, my virginity is restored each time. Which means every king that has, or every father, everyone who reproduces of me can be certain that this is my child. Because it said in the next year that you go to that person, but you leave your child behind. You leave that first child behind and go. So it's actually quite an extraordinary element. It's literally like a womb that is being bought and sold, for a brief period, for a year-long period. So now, I just thought, what kind of a character is this, and how is the Kshatriya princess, Yayati's daughter, firstly she doesn't even appear elsewhere, you have other stories, and then suddenly she appears as a daughter. We don't even know who her mother is. There's a what would you call a question mark around all of that. But as you read the text, you find she's actually interesting, because when she is being look at the instrumentality of the father. He said, "Acha, ab teri main swayam karwa leta hu. Now you choose your partner." Up tak the choice nahi tha, because you had to get 200 horses each, or whatever the horses. But now you can have the choice, and then she turns around and says, it's ceremonially described that she leaves and comes in a chariot and whatever, and then she chooses the forest. She's saying, I'm done with this. The role that you've allotted to me, I'm done with. I'm not going to now marry, whether it's Galav or whether it's some other man who will not use me instrumentally. She's just done with it. So she's performed her role of reproduction. She's paid back the debts of her father, and she's now someone who can actually make a choice. So the forest represents the only choice that a woman can have at that point of time, and she chooses that. And then as the storyline proceeds, I was struck by the fact that she is adding to, the father is perpetually lacking in merit. उसके पास कोई मेरिट नहीं है, वो बेटे से ले लेता है, उससे ले लेता है, किसी से ले लेता है, आते जाते जो भी है ना उनसे ले लेता है, गालव से ले लेता है. So the fact is that Madhavi is buying his, what would you call it? Contributing to his merit so that he can get what he's done. So in a sense, she's doing what the sons do. And so that's the very interesting thing, that she's paying off the debt to her father. And initially I thought and then she's performing dharma, because at the end of the day, she gains merit on her own count. Not because she produced sons, not because she was hawked to four different people. The merit is something she has accumulated for herself. So, in one sense, that's why I read that chapter. That was the last chapter that I was writing, and I began with looking at her as a agency-less character. कोई अपनी स्वायत्तता तो उसकी थी नहीं. That's what I thought. But then, at the end of the day, I see her as actually, in a sense, within the dynamics of the Mahabharata, being able to show up men's dharma poorly in relation to the dharma that she performs as a daughter. So, and to that extent, her answer to this instrumentalization of her womb is very different from, we all thought Amba is a great character, because Amba, she said that I'll be reborn a woman and a man, and she comes, and then Bhishma has to have the ignominy of being killed by a woman. Actually, we know that because Arjun piche se marta hai na, the arrow is not coming from poor Shikhandi. Yeah. So if you look at it from that point of view, you suddenly find that actually Madhavi has managed to reverse the reification of the womb that happens to potential womb that happens in the case of Amba. So I think in that sense she's actually showing Rajdharma up for its stupidity and its valueness. It's in the larger context of merit. You've got nothing, and this is what I have been able to. So I then saw that as very powerful, because otherwise I was going to say ये क्या औरत है, मतलब खुद कहती है मैं मेरे पास ये I've got this gain, I've got this merit that I can give, I can give you sons, Chakravarti sons. So that I think was in one sense very important. So the two things that I did in the last bit of writing, one was the Madhvi story, and the other was to bring back Vidura centrally to the story. And that's significant. That's where I think that I have done. Maybe you had a question around Ambedkar. And see, I think if you bring back dharma in its context, and dharma is contested right through history, dharma, कौन किसका धर्म कैसे किया जाता है, that is a thread in the let's say in the idea of royalty, of kingship, rule, and so on. Dharma, Buddhist is very different from the dharma of the Kshatriya dharma, that is, because the king who does not conquer becomes the dharmic person in the Buddhist textual tradition, who actually is able to persuade you. And if you look at the Chakravarti, it's Chakravarti, which sutta is that? It's one of the important ones, Siddhanada Sutta. That one, the whole way in which the king should rule, the ideal king, which ultimately becomes the model for Ashoka in some ways, that is that understanding of dharma is a much expanded understanding of dharma. They try and put it even into the let's say the normative tradition of the even the Hindu formulation of it. But the fact is that so Rajdharma is meant to be more ethical in that sense. But here it's very, he plays a critical role in actually ensuring that famine nahi hoga, or जिसके पास ज़मीन नहीं है उसको ज़मीन देना चाहिए. All that is marked out in that Chakravarti Dhammiko Dhamaraja. There is a whole sutta like that. So if you look at those suttas, the Buddhist worldview of kingly power is an interesting one. It's quite an interesting one. So dharma itself can be, and it's not a static concept. People keep interpreting it according to their own context and their issues. So to that extent, see, it's our problem is that we unify the tradition, make it dominant, and you use the hegemonic one, which is कि आज के क्या कहा जा रहा है उसी को तुम agenda हो जाए तो then you don't look at the text for its multiple possibilities, or the tradition is multifold. We have a lot to choose from. There is no reason for us to choose only in a single thread. We have a lot in our tradition to choose from. There is an ethicality also to our tradition. Questions have been raised. But I think the question that I posed, which is, why is it that 4 critical questions are asked? But उसमें अम्बा का question रह जाता है. How could you do this to me? तूने मेरी agency को thwart कर दी और मेरी choice को thwart कर दी. ये जो चीज़ है. And then the story, if you look at that story, she comes back. Amba comes back in the 4th parva also, where she argues, where she tries to persuade Parshurama. Parshurama, the great killer of the Kshatriyas. She's saying, देखो, they have done wrong to me. He then said, I only act on behalf of Brahmins, he says. So, she's not a Brahmin woman. But then she persuades him finally, he's persuaded. And then he fights a tinny battle, and Bhishma manages to counter him. So he just gives up on that. So uska redressal to hota hi nahi hai na. In one sense, Amba apni Madhavi redressal khud karti hai. और उसी जन्म में करती है. उसको रहने की जरूरत नहीं है. And she is not dependent on another man. Amba goes back to the first man that she was in love with, and he ditches her because he said, you have been actually sexually molested. मतलब you can also imagine कि एक स्वयंवर से भीष्म उठा के 3 औरतों को पकड़ता है. तो you look at the chariots, the size of them. He must have gathered them up in physically touch them and put them in, force them onto the chariot, ना. तो वो तो मतलब भंग तो हो गई है. उसके ऊपर now this so that thwarted man is very unhappy, and he says, but you are now polluted, so now इधर की रही ना उधर की रही, and उस तरह से पकड़ी गई. Whereas Madhavi, despite being turned into an instrument, turns around and manages to get dharma for herself. So that's what I found powerful in looking at her story.
This is with relation to women's agency in this movement. We know that we understand the concept of Swayamvar as an institute or as a practice where the woman gets to choose her own husband. But in the case of Draupadi and Sita, we see that in her Swayamvar, her fathers arranged for a competition where the winner would actually get to marry their daughter. So in that context, how do we really see women exercising their agency?
No. See, firstly, it's highly caste specific.
Excuse me, Professor, we are running out of time. Can we take a bunch of questions?
Sure.
2 more questions, please.
I have a short question. So, very fascinating discussion, and reflecting from that, I was just wondering, as you use this sexuality as resource in your articulation, I was just wondering, the resource to be controlled, so it was specific to the royal women, or it was related to the whole society, because when we see sexuality as a control for resource or for service, how do we redefine it in order to understand the social order at that point of time?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
One last question.
That one.
And throughout your thoughts, I see there is a tension between what should be conceived of the patriarchy as a structure, or caste or class as a structure, and how they are operating. And I was taken, I noticed what you said about looking from below. Can we not apply this understanding of looking from below to the text? That we should, in a sense, how the text is resisting these dissolutions of dominant structures operating, and or in a sense constructing its own context of that. So Dr. Yadav said that history is a critique in this. I think more in my sense, I think it would be more a post-critique scenario, where we go on and see whether the text is constructing its own nuances, how it's creating its own structures. Within the case of Madhvi, for instance, Madhvi is shown to be working in her own way, and then this whole episode of Madhvi can also be interpreted as a way in which the desire is critiqued, in which the male domination is critiqued, in the structure of patriarchy itself is critiqued.
Yeah.
And in the cases of Pandus, the sons of Pandus, the 5 Pandavas, they ultimately emerge victorious. So even if they are, the Arjuna is criticizing Niyog and all this formation, the story ends with them victorious. And there are multiple cases happening here. So the discourse is, I think, a very long discourse of
Yeah.
in a very different manner. So don't you think, ma'am, that we should, give up these presuppositions that you have done? I mean, it is very effective in your analysis. So we should give up these presuppositions of structures and see if the text is self-creating something.
Yeah. Let's start with the last one because it's easier to go and I'll be reminded more easily with that. That's the whole point. If we don't read, you read, let's say sympathetically, but along, not necessarily against the grain, not necessarily along the grain. So the along the grain would mean that you have to uphold the logic of the Mahabharata itself, okay, whatever it's saying. But the Mahabharata is giving you its own points of tension. And to that extent, it becomes interesting what is it that the text or that social order or the will permit and what will it not permit, So when you do the reading from below, and I think I tried to do the reading from below, I did it in 2 chapters, noticeably in 2 chapters. You'll find that my chapter on Draupadi is a completely different chapter from anybody else's, because I don't look at Draupadi as someone who is showing such great agency at all. I mean, it's true that the stripping should never have happened, but the fact of the matter is that if we put it in context, so if you put the Dasi at the bottom, the Dasi is at the bottom, okay, of the social order, of the women's social order also, entire. The Dasi is never the object of what's it called? She is never given the agency. Even Vidura's mother remains nameless. उसका नाम ही नहीं है. विदुर की माँ है, but she remains nameless. And she says that she pleases the what's his name Vyasa, and it is because she pleases him so much that now. Dasis were meant to serve the masters, whoever they are being allotted to. So she performs her services, she's done her quote-unquote her dharma according to the rationale of the text social order, the high and the low. The Dasi has pleased him effectively, and he says to her, which the Kshatriya princesses have not done, because they are irritated with उससे बू आ रही है, उसका शक्ल एक तरह से है, and so on. So at the end of the day, the Dasi, the nameless Dasi, Vidura Mata we'll call her, is someone who does not, who is there in the text and she's not there in some ways. But if you look at the whole entire Sabha Parvan, one of the things that you notice is that the Dasi is routinely granted. The king, when Yudhishthira loses the kingdom, he loses the kingdom and it passes to the Kurus from in its entirety. Everyone, it includes the kingdom with all its Dasis and Dasas are what's it called? Monetized. They are almost equivalent to whatever it is. They are handed over routinely. Okay. Now, who has that? And finally, who has choice at the end of the day in this entire situation? Draupadi has to be made into a Dasi before she can be sexually molested. उसको बोला वस्त्रहरण जो हो रहा है ना, वस्त्रहरण is following the Pandavas are also asked to strip. वो अपनी उत्तरी उतारते हैं. Uttari is a sign of the manhood and upper caste. Okay, once they take it off, so now Dasi has been made bandaki already. That's what the trading match is all about. And then I'll have a long discussion about the fact that the right to cover the breast is a highly political act in the Indian context, because who can cover their breast and who can't is contested right till the 19th century in South India, with the breast cloth controversy. So let's understand the politics for itself. अब उसमें, if you are a Western feminist, or I shouldn't say Western feminist like that, but ऐसा नहीं बोलना चाहिए, because बेचारे वो भी अपने आदत के मजबूर हैं. But the fact is that they have seen Draupadi as the liberated woman. But she's hardly liberated. She's not at all liberated. And when you consider that she's refusing to be made into bandaki. Kshatriya. How can you reduce a Kshatriya woman to this condition? किसी और को कर सकते हो, but मेरे को नहीं कर सकते हो, है ना? At the end of the day, now, how can you regard her as a feminist issue? Genuinely a feminist issue. You can't do this to any woman. She says you can't do this to me. She isolates herself. So reading from below करोगे तो सब कुछ निकल आएगा यार. हाँ. अच्छा, there is that there was a second. हाँ. What was your question? So give me a hint.
Yeah, so the question was that it was like the sexuality as a source was limited to the royal woman.
Yeah.
Or women in general.
No. I think the sexuality. Who had control over sexuality? The Dasi's husband would not have control over her sexuality fully. Okay, he may cohabit with her, but her sexuality is under the control of the masters. Okay, so there are differing levels of control over sexuality. It's the context of, even today you think that the Dalit woman's body is available to everybody in the caste order, everyone above. Contest is coming because assertion is also coming, saying कि ये नहीं होना चाहिए, at the end of the day. So control over sexuality is actually a very highly refined notion. और एक धर्म नहीं चला, पतिव्रता धर्म जो है, तुम भी कुछ भी कह लो, but पतिव्रता धर्म is only there for the uppermost castes. एक औरत के लिए एक मर्द, एक ही बार मर्द, and जब उसके बाद उसकी, there's no reason for her to be, remarriage itself is a problematic category, because अगर तुम्हारा शोहर मर गया है, then there is no point, your sexuality is closed forever, there is no point. That is why तुम सती बन जाओ या तुम celibate widow बन जाओ. But other categories में, and we have such which बहुत अच्छा feminist काम किया गया है, where you look at, say, the Jat woman or other categories of women, they don't have. Jat women, for instance, एक बार तो उनकी शादी हो जाती है एक घर में, and प्रेम चौधरी का काम है, बहुत अच्छा काम उस पर. Then if the husband dies, she enters into a levirate relationship with her brother-in-law. जितने दिन वो reproduce कर सकती है, वो करती है. क्यों? Because उस community में laboring hands are very important. आप ज़मीन है तुम्हारे पास, you need lots of people to work the land. And the Jats work their own land often, So the norms are also caste specific. So if you go down the line, you will find it's a different set of assumptions. So the sexuality of women is controlled, and it's controlled, in my opinion, within the logic of Brahmanical patriarchy. That's why I call it Brahmanical patriarchy. Abhi mujhe recently, there was a criticism that I had used the word Dalit patriarchy, and which I revised in the last version. We should not say Dalit patriarchy, because Dalit patriarchy does not have the force of, what's it called? Legitimacy. Okay? So it's better to say patriarchy amongst the Dalits rather than to say Dalit patriarchy. Only Brahmanical patriarchy in the sense of the structure. The structure is dictated by the structure of caste, which is a larger context. It's not that only the Brahmins are gaining from it, but the fact is that caste as a hierarchy is something that is reflected, okay, in whatever way. So I think we have to be constantly refine our thinking and refine our argument to be able to do that. Okay. Now there was one last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So
Women's agency, especially in relation to Sita.
See, the fact of the matter is that when it's called Swayamvara, we think it is free choice. But the free choice is controlled. Because who is allowed to enter that Swayamvara? It's only Kshatriyas. So already you have reduced it to a segment of society, not all of society. You get even better when you put conditions on it. And why is it that both in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, you get the condition being put, which is a contest is created, who's the best is one of them. But equally, in Mahabharata ke itne versions hain, in one of the versions, Karna is meant to be a contestant, but his Draupadi is supposed to insult him and say, "Tu kaun aaya? Tu to Kshatriya nahi hai." So caste is varna and hierarchy. Stratification is evident in whatever is happening. So choice of, even when you say the Kshatriya, only the Kshatriyas have right to Swayamvar, and you can also have Rakshas for them, okay? So at the end of the day, abduction भी उनके लिए वाजिब है और choice भी है. Choice को disrupt करना है तो कृष्ण भगवान ने ही कह दिया कि भैया don't leave it to the औरतें, वो उनका मन पलट सकता है उस वक्त, so don't leave it to them. So the divine Lord himself has said that. So at the end of the day, you can't afford to do that free choice, because the free choice will hit back on you. उसको hedge करने की जरूरत पड़ेगी ना. So that, I think, in one sense, we think that, well, I agree that I'm not saying stable category of Varna is there and completely closed and not whatever it is. But ideologically, it is in place. And there is a rationale for keeping it in that form. Why should choice be available to the Kshatriyas alone? And see, in a sense, reproduction for the Kshatriya means something completely different than for the Brahman, for whom you only need to have the production of a son who can carry on the Vedas or carry on the recitation. So actually we have to look at the rationale of the system. Internally काफी consistent है. I wouldn't say कि हर चीज बिल्कुल consistent है, पर उसका logic बन जाता है. And you see, ये बात हो रही है कि who owns the womb and whatever it is. It's very powerful in the both Krishna and Kunti. Kunti doesn't say it, but Krishna. When Krishna tells Karna to switch sides, he said, "तुम इस side में आ जाओ." And the reason why he tells him, "You are the brother, so you are the eldest." And the king who marries you officially is the owner of your womb. That's why anyone can plant anyone. It will belong to the king. Even to the person who person who progenited before you were officially married to him. Now that's an extraordinary thing. So the womb is something which is almost like a material thing which is being considered usable in a certain kind of way. And then among the things he says is that then you will be acknowledged as the eldest son. You will have the throne. पहले तो you will get the throne. Okay. So Yudhishthira again comes in because he will only be the younger brother, at the end. And you will also get to sleeping with Draupadi in the 6th term. I mean, look at how instrumental it is. ललचा रहे हैं उसको, क्या कहते हैं? Carrot दे रहे हैं. Bribe किया जा रहा है उसको. And this is all that is said. It's interesting that Kunti बोलती है ना, Kunti नहीं बोलती है. Kunti doesn't bring that up. Kunti simply says, "You owe it to me. I brought you into the world, so you owe it to me. Now you palto, palto and come on." I said. So it's so instrumental. Chit bhi meri, pat bhi meri.
I would just